Jó napot kívánok, tisztelt Hölgyeim és Uraim!
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. May I extend my most heartfelt welcome to the President of the Russian Federation and his delegation on the occasion of today's press conference. The practice reaches back for many a year that annually we hold a high-level meeting between the Russian Federation and Hungary, the objective of which is to review where the bilateral relationships are standing at. Once upon a time when we thought of this, our objective was to take one step ahead each year in the field of economic and political cooperation. If we look back, I must confess that we have had more successful and less successful years. Sometimes we only took tiny steps ahead, and sometimes we stepped ahead miles. Last year falls under the latter category. If we look back upon past years, then we can see that since the introduction of the sanctions against the Russian Federation, 2018 is the first year when the trade turnover between the two countries once again increased. Therefore, 2018 is an especially significant year in the economic relationship between the two countries. In fact, the total trade was over $6 billion and reached almost $6.5 billion. Hungarian intentions were never kept a secret. Beyond mutual respect, frankness is the foundation of the relationship between the two countries, and it seems that Russia has a huge surplus in this commerce, this trade, due to the fact that we purchase oil, gas, and energy. This is an unbalanced situation, and we wish to balance it out. For that, there are two methods. One is that we do our best to reach an agreement with Russia, which would enable us to observe the territory of Russia as an area of investments, which would mean that we could perform capital investments there. And the other option is that we have products worthy of export that we can export there. If these two work out, then this will be advantageous both to us and the Russian economy. This is the win-win situation that we wish to achieve. Beyond economic cooperation, naturally, there is political cooperation also between the two countries. On behalf of Hungary, the foundation of this cooperation is a very simple geographical fact, namely that no country can change their address. Every country is where God put it. For Hungary, this means that we have lived the past 1,000 years and continue to live our lives in a Berlin-Moscow-Istanbul triangle, and it would be our interest to make sure that every great power be interested in Hungary's success, but especially those countries which have a significant impact on our life. Falling under this approach is the Russian-Hungarian cooperation. Obviously, Hungary is also a member of NATO and the European Union and shall remain so. This, however, does not exclude the fact that we enter into political cooperation in some issues with Russia, which we have done in the past and shall strive to do so in the future. The highlighted fields of this political cooperation are the following. We still have a meeting today which will happen with the heads of persecuted religious leaders. This is one of our political cooperations, the protection of Christian communities throughout the world, which is a continuation of the traditions laid down by Saint Stephen I of Hungary. We also have political cooperation in the area of migration, since we both know and are aware of the dangers this poses. Even today on the Balkan route between Turkey and Hungary, that is, there are 96,000 migrants moving towards the north on this route, which concerns us and obliges us to strengthen our border protection. In a different dimension, but Russia also has a similar migration and border protection problems. We also have political cooperation in terms of the stability of the Middle East. Hungary is fully aware of its importance, significance, and size in this matter, but is also fully aware of its own interests. And today, the world is as such that there are Hungarian interests in the Middle East, since if that region destabilizes, then we shall have an increasing number of migrants arriving from that region to Europe who will do their best to reach the continent through Hungary. Therefore, we are interested in achieving military and political stability in Syria and in the Middle East in general. The press does not always concern itself with this phenomenon, but our cooperation also extends to the Kurds living in Iraq, because Hungary provided military training and economic support for the Ebriti Kurds. Among the political cooperations is also the fact that Hungary is interested in improving cooperation between NATO and Russia. We have an experience here in Hungary, a political and historical experience, which means that if the relationships between Western and Eastern Europe, that is NATO and Russia, are weak, then Hungary always loses. If the relationships are good, then Hungary always wins. Therefore, we are interested and shall remain to be interested in improving the relationship and cooperation between the Western European structures and Russia. And finally, ladies and gentlemen, I wish to share with you that after the press conference, there shall be a list provided on the investments. All I wish to share now, that's in the territory of Hungary, we have successfully implemented meat sector investment, healthcare investments, and pharmaceutical investment. Therefore, due to our cooperation with the Russian government, Hungary could not only increase its export towards Russia. When it comes to grains, for instance, we are at a very high position, but also we managed to improve the number and capacity of factories, manufacturing plants located in Russia. Therefore, from a Hungarian aspect, the relationship has developed, for which I wish to relay my heartfelt gratitude to the President of the Russian Federation of Russia. Thank you very much for your kind attention. Thank you very much, Mr. Prime Minister. And may I now invite His Excellency Mr. Vladimir Putin, President of the Russian Federation, to deliver his declaration. Thank you very much, distinguished Prime Minister, ladies and gentlemen. First of all, allow me to convey my heartfelt thanks to Mr. Prime Minister for his kind invitation. He has just shared with you, and indeed, a mechanism has been in operation for years now that we continue our cooperation at the highest possible level, which is successful, taking into consideration especially commercial and economic relationships between the two countries. We discussed in detail the complexity of Russian-Hungarian relationships, and we drew the conclusions in relation to the agreements that we have discussed during the course of our previous meetings. A very significant package of documents has been signed today, which obviously will serve the purposes of further deepening the relationship between the two countries, Russia and Hungary. Last year, as my colleague has already mentioned, the trade has increased with almost 30%. According to our statistics, this comprises almost $7 billion. We are further working on the improved activation of this trade in the form of the Intergovernmental Working Group, which last week in Moscow debated in detail the opportunities for further increasing trade related to goods. I will also mention energy, but we are striving to diversify our relationships, and all in all, I believe that we are successful. Energy is at the first place, naturally, since Russia provides 60% of the oil and 50% of the gas for Hungary. But according to Hungarian statistics, this is actually even more than 50%, but this is not the most important. The most important is that our cooperation is implemented at the highest level, at the best possible quality. You witnessed the signature of an agreement between MOL, Lukoil and Transneft, which will enable the further increase of oil exports from Russia through the Druzhba pipeline. And it is through this that Russia transports oil and gas towards Western Europe. Hungary's gas storage enables us to provide gas and oil for Western Europe, even when we have peak demands. Hungary is a key partner in this matter on the already existing routes and on the new southern and northern routes as well. The nuclear power plant in Paks and especially the construction of the two new blocks there are of great significance to us. 40% of Hungarian electricity is already manufactured here. The supplemented capacities will increase this volume twofold. When we debated or discussed our joint projects in the field of industrial cooperation, we also touched upon Hungarian river navigation, and we hope that the modernization of the Budapest underground line shall also continue. Hungarian and Russian cooperation is very important in the social level as well. We signed an agreement on social security, which will naturally help the citizens of Hungary and Russia during the course of the determination of pensions to take into consideration fully time spent in work. Interregional cooperation is also very important. Our colleagues just signed the action plan for the Hungarian-Russian interregional cooperation at the level of an intergovernmental complex program. All regions of the two countries are actually cooperating with each other. Also in the field of culture and education. On October 26th, they shall hold the Day of Russian Spiritual Culture. We are very grateful to our Hungarian partners for restoring the Ouspensky Cathedral here in Budapest and two other churches in Tokaj and Miskolc. We also touched upon regional and international topics. We discussed how we could normalize the relationships between the European Union and Russia, and we also touched upon the resolution of the Ukrainian crisis. We also mentioned energy supplies in the case of energy resources coming from Russia. We also mentioned the Syrian issue and the regulation of the Syrian conflicts, which we shall continue to do so in the future. The political regulation of the Syrian conflict shall be helped by a constitutional commission, in which Russia has done a lot with its partners from Turkey and Iran. Geneva was the place where this committee met just recently. Therefore, the Syrian society will be able to directly work on constitutional reform, on the construction of the state, and for establishing a sustainable development for the country, which is very important both for Hungary and for Europe as a whole. During the course of our talks, we also discussed the situation of Christian communities in the Middle East and Africa. After the press conference, we shall enter into a more detailed discussion of that when we meet with heads of the church. I'd like to thank Mr. Prime Minister because this meeting was brought about upon his initiative. Russia is ready to further cooperate with Hungary and other interested parties in providing support for Christians in the Middle East and in Africa. To us, it is unacceptable that anyone is persecuted due to their religious beliefs. And finally, allow me to express my gratitude to Mr. Prime Minister for his invitation and for this friendly, constructive meeting which characterized today's dialogue. Thank you. Thank you very much. And now we have time for a few questions. First, on behalf of the Hungarian television.
Jó napot kívánok, Orbán Viktor miniszterelnök úrtól kérdezném.
Good evening. My question is to Prime Minister Viktor Orban. Prime Minister, Hungary vetoed the declaration issued by NATO leaders pertaining to Ukraine. What were the aspects that led to this decision? To veto something in the Hungarian language sounds very strange. We actually sent it back for further consideration. As far as I know, the wording is actually currently underway. I'll give you a specific answer to the question, and I'll give you a context. What we're specifically discussing here is that we have to accept a document which is accepted by the European Union member states and the Ukraine, and this shall be extended to NATO member states as well. The debate was on the following: what can we do with a situation where the Hungarian minorities in Ukraine suffer discrimination? They suffer legal discrimination, and they are often facing political threats and economic threats too. On the Hungarian side, we wish to achieve that the Ukrainians undertake that the recommendations of the Venice Commission shall be taken into consideration. We are not asking them to reinstate the situation that they demolished, but at least to accept the corrections or initiatives provided by the Venice Commission, and this should be incorporated into the document. If this is not incorporated into the document, then we cannot sign anything, because that would mean that we give up on the European rights that should be guaranteed to the Hungarians living in Transcarpathia. And I'd like to share with you two further sentences. When the international press writes about the Ukrainian-Hungarian relationships, they always put this into the context of a Russian-Hungarian relationship, which is a total misunderstanding. The Hungarian-Ukrainian relationship should be interpreted within that context. The Russian-Ukrainian relationship should be interpreted in the Normandy 4 context. So when Hungary states anything in relation to Ukraine, it does not do so in the context of a Russian relationship, but from the interest of Hungary. I kindly ask everyone to separate the two issues. Hungary has its own national issues pertaining to Ukrainian authorities, in which case we hope that the situation will improve. It is perhaps not an exaggeration if I say that the previous Ukrainian government and authority was openly anti-Hungarian. We now have a new president, new hopes, new opportunities. I myself will do my best in order to establish real negotiations between Hungary and the new Ukrainian president, and I shall not give up my optimism, and I sincerely hope that we shall take significant steps ahead in the interests of the Hungarian minorities in Ukraine, which will only be possible if we keep to our standpoints in international negotiations. Thank you. Interfax has the next question.
Мой вопрос касается энергетики.
Good afternoon. My question is related to energy, and I'd like to touch upon a few topics, if I may. The question is to both of you. Are there specific deadlines when Hungary will join Turk Stream? And this was the first question. The second question is that just recently, could you give a comment on the recent trilateral negotiations and talks? And I'd like you also to evaluate Denmark's standpoints on the Nord Stream. Many doubted that this would be a positive decision. Nonetheless, the decision has been communicated, so I'd like to hear your comments on this decision. Do you see any political reasoning in that. Well, as for the deadlines,
Поправить, если ошибаюсь, для Венгрии участие в этом проекте
please
представляет
correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Prime Minister. Hungary is interested in this project since this provides the energy security and safety of the country, and it's very important because it has to also fulfill its undertaking towards the European Union. Hopefully, by the end of this year, the construction of Turk Stream shall be completed. The pipeline running across the sea has already been completed, and I sincerely hope that the Bulgarian and Serbian partners will also manage to complete the works. 15 kilometers is the length that concerns Hungary, and as far as I can see, the implementation of this construction shall be completed by early next year. Hopefully, we shall be very fast in completion. Both parties look upon this in a very positive manner. The talks that you referred to in Brussels took place 2 weeks ago. All of us know how these talks have been evaluated. I believe that the opinions and the evaluations differ here. I believe that a constructive result was achieved by both parties, both the Russian and the Ukrainian parties. I believe that the decision of the arbitrary court of $7 billion US dollars to be paid by the Russian Federation is unacceptable. It's absurd. And the same goes for the Stockholm decision. I do believe that we have to do away with this absurdity, and we have to forfeit our demands. We are still in favor of cooperation, and I do believe that the transportation of gas and oil is conceivable at a lower price.
Нет, это не реверс, это ложный реверс. Но бог с ним, с этим ложным реверсом. Главное, что выгоду...
Russian gas is transported without a doubt, and the most important thing is that we must see what interests are behind the Ukrainian decision. It's also very important to take into consideration the interests of the end users. As for the decision of Denmark, yes, when we arrived here in Hungary, we saw the decision of Denmark, which opted to allow for the construction of Nord Stream within its own territory, which is a very positive outcome, and we welcome it. It's very important to protect the sovereignty of our most important European partners, because they are interested in diversification and are also interested in making sure that the Russian market stays open to them. I do believe this is not very difficult to understand Hungarians. We are fixated to a certain extent. We are fixated towards sovereignty in our policy. The independence and sovereignty of the country is the most important, and the same goes for energy. In relation to energy, this means that we like to remain independent and sovereign as concerns where we purchase our energy from. Therefore, all opportunities interest us. Currently, we purchase a lot from Russia, but we would welcome the opportunity to purchase energy from elsewhere too, and the opportunities are actually increasing throughout Europe. We also wish to remain sovereign, maintain our sovereignty in terms of transfer countries. And if we can only purchase gas through Ukraine from Russia, then that's bad for Hungary. Therefore, we are interested in purchasing Russian gas from a multiple amount of pipelines. Therefore, the Turk Stream is a preference of ours, because this would mean that Hungary is not exposed from the aspect of transit countries. To give you a specific answer, we're talking about a very complicated procedure, but the open season procedure has gone into step 2 from step 1, which will come to a closure soon. This shall be followed by the obligatory quotation periods, which will mean that the pipelines shall be laid down. I am hoping for a very early date. Mr. President mentioned that this could happen early next year. We are doing our best to keep to this date, and we shall invite the tenders, after which we shall accept the best quote, obviously. There is Serbian aspect to the phenomenon as well. We are very good partners with Serbia, and we have always received the gas we wanted through Serbia. But I do imagine that Serbia also considers sovereignty very important, which means that they wish to receive gas not only through us but through other transit countries as well, which will mean a decrease in our transit fee. Nonetheless, we have to take into consideration the interests of other countries, and therefore I am very happy that the Serbs will have an opportunity to receive gas from elsewhere as well. This is the Hungarian viewpoint, therefore, and I wish to reiterate that during the past years, we have observed these years that the opportunities of Hungary have become more diversified from the aspects of energy, and we have extensive opportunities when it comes to transportation. Therefore, the geopolitical position of Hungary from the aspects of energy has been improving, which was only a dream when I was a young individual back in communist times. Thank you very much. Next question to Origo.
Jó estét kívánok, Kovács András vagyok az Origótól.
Good evening, I'm András Kovács from Origo. Dear Mr. President, dear Mr. Prime Minister, after today's press conference, you shall meet with the church leaders of the Middle East in Budapest. Why did you consider this meeting important? What results do you expect? And what agreements can you enter into in order to ensure the situation of Christian communities in the Middle East?
Dimenziókülönbségek vannak.
Well, we're talking about differences in dimension.
Lehetőségei azok sokkal nagyobbak.
The opportunities of Russia are far greater, since Russia also assumes a military role in the stabilization of territories where there is a Christian minority. Hungary does not have this capability. What we do have, however, is a 1,000-year-old political experience and practice. I'm sharing this with foreign journalists. The handbook of Hungarian politics was written 1,000 years ago by the first Hungarian king. Everything is written down there, what you should know about assuming power if you are Hungarian. It also includes clearly that Hungarians, as an ethnic community, as a culture, will only remain as long as they remain within Christianity. This has nothing to do with the church. Well, it does, but that's not the main essence of it. The main essence is that we must remain in a Christian culture, and it is our obligation to help not only on our own territory, but also in extraterritorial regions, the Christian communities who are in trouble. We have always done our best to achieve that. We were either less or more successful. Nowadays, we are rather more successful. We shall enter into discussing aids, help, how jointly with Russia we shall restore church buildings, and we shall also touch up on how jointly with Russia we shall establish manufacturing plants, factories, which will contribute to the welfare of those living in the area. Hungary is also actually constructing and reconstructing schools, villages, and other settlements where people can be relocated within Syria or even from Europe if they arrived as migrants from Syria to Europe. This is part of our policy where we say that we have to provide help there locally and not bring trouble here.
Министр в целом уже ответил на ваш вопрос, но я могу только добавить. Всем хорошо известно.
Thank you very much. Mr. Prime Minister has already answered the question. All I wish to add is that the Middle East is the cradle of Christianity. The Christians, the Christian population of the Middle East suffer persecution and violence. They are exploited, and we must do everything in our power to provide help for them. We do this in close cooperation with the leadership of these countries. The Russian Federation in Syria does not only provide help to Christians, but also provides help for the Muslim population. Since we reconstruct mosques, we provide humanitarian aid to individuals who gather at the mosques and ask for help. We play a significant role in maintaining security too. And we are fully aware that many arrive to these areas from the territory of the Northern Caucasus. And we also provide help for the Jewish population and cooperate regularly. As for Christians, we're talking about a persecuted religion, therefore we feel it is our obligation to provide support to these groups. We're not talking about agreements, contracts. What agreements could we even mention when we wish to cooperate with a religious group? No, we're simply talking about help. We wish to provide help to them in order for them to be able to restore their living areas. We want to provide help to them in the restoration of their villages, settlements, and the restoration of their religious buildings. And my heartfelt thanks goes to Mr. Prime Minister for this initiative. The last question goes to RT. Good evening. I am in representation of RT channel, and my question goes to both of you. I'd like to return to the topic of Ukraine, and I'd ask the question from a different angle, a different aspect. The triangle that you mentioned, I would turn around. You have probably heard of the fact that Mr. Zelensky, my question rather is, what is your take on how strongly Zelensky addressed the extreme Ukrainian nationalists? And I'd also like to ask you what your take is on the dispatching of military forces in East Ukraine, and what further information we can expect in November. Well, I don't think it is my task to evaluate Mr. Zelensky's actions. But as for the nationalists in Ukraine, naturally, Mr. Zelensky is not the same as these ideas. He is not the equivalent of these people, but I do not know how well he shall be able to manage these people and this situation. And when he personally talks to people who do not follow his orders, I don't know whether I could even evaluate this action. The question is the following. Is what everything he said, mentioned, talked about, to what extent will he be able to fulfill what he talks about? To what extent will he be able to fulfill his objectives? Because we're talking about issues that have been unsolved, unresolved for years. The nationalists do not wish to leave the territory. Therefore, the issue is rather to what extent the Ukrainian leadership will be able to resolve the situation in East Ukraine. As for the Normandy format, we are always ready to participate at any talks, meeting where we can resolve the situation, be that the Normandy format or another format. I believe that we must find an answer to the situation. Just two short sentences as an answer, if I may. Hungary, as a member of the European Union, we have given the full green light to the leaders of the Normandy format, and we hope for a resolution to the problem through that format. The second sentence relates to an old Hungarian custom. While those who don't speak Hungarian, don't read in Hungarian, and don't know this nation, this is not so simple for them. But in Hungary, what we say is that if we do not get to know someone personally, we do not issue our opinion on them. I await the opportunity to meet the new president of Ukraine. Prime Minister, Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen, our press conference has come to an end. Thank you very much for your kind attention, and I wish you a pleasant remaining of the evening.
További szép estét kívánok.